The first day I moved into my new place, I knew it wouldn't be quiet for long. It was one of those tightly managed HOA neighborhoods, the kind where everyone's lawn looks like it came from a catalog. And people wave while watching you just a second too long. I had barely parked the truck when she showed up. Clipboard in one hand, phone in the other. Classic Karen vibes. She didn't even introduce herself before pointing out a ranch fine I had apparently triggered. Something about the moving truck being parked too long or some vague guideline about grass height. I hadn't even unpacked a single box. I tried to stay calm, told her I'd look into it once I got settled. That's when she dialed the cops right in front of me, didn't even hesitate. Said I was being non-compliant with HOA policy and refusing a direct neighborhood order. I didn't even know that was a thing. A couple of neighbors peeked out from their windows. You could feel the tension, some probably waiting to see a scene. Others maybe just used to her antics. The cops pulled up fast, too fast for a minor call like this. 2 officers stepped out. I braced myself, already frustrated and tired, expecting a long explanation just to prove I wasn't causing any trouble. But what happened next stopped everything. The taller officer looked at me, then glanced at his partner, and said one word I didn't expect, "Captain." Karen froze. Her eyes darted between me and them, suddenly not so confident. I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. That one word changed the whole energy on the street. The neighbors watching weren't blinking. And Karen, for once, she was completely speechless. What happened next? You're not gonna believe. The second he said "Captain," everything got quiet, like someone hit mute on the whole block. Karen's face twisted, trying to make sense of it, but you could tell she didn't like not knowing something. The officers gave me a respectful nod, one of those you only give someone you've worked with or maybe owed something to. I didn't answer right away. Honestly, I was still trying to decide how much of my past I was willing to let into my new life. This move was supposed to be a fresh start. Low-key, quiet, definitely not police at my curb on day one. Karen stepped back. Little, her voice suddenly smaller. Wait, Captain? Captain of what? Her curiosity was already turning into paranoia. The neighbors were now out on porches, pretending to check mail or water plants, but we all knew they were watching this unfold. It wasn't every day Karen got put on the spot. I just looked at the officer and said, "Nice to see you again." He nodded and responded, "Didn't expect to run into you here." That made Karen flinch again. She crossed her arms and tried to save face, tossing out a nervous laugh. Well, I was only trying to enforce HOA policy. We have rules. That's when one of the officers stepped closer to her and politely said, "Ma'am, I think this situation's under control. We'll take it from here." That line alone made Karen backpedal hard. She muttered something about needing to check on her dog and disappeared faster than she showed up. But even with her gone, I could feel the eyes. Whispers already starting. Who was I? What was my history with the cops? And why did someone call me Captain? I moved here to blend in, but it was clear now. That plan was already in trouble. The rest of that day felt heavier than it should have. I went back to unloading boxes, but I could feel people watching, quiet glances from behind blinds. Neighbors walking their dogs just a little slower past my driveway. Word spreads fast in an HOA neighborhood, especially when Karen gets involved. I could only imagine the stories already forming. I wasn't just the new guy anymore. I was Captain, and nobody seemed sure what that meant. Later that evening, I took a walk down the block to cool off and maybe shake the feeling that I'd stepped into a fishbowl. That's when I met Jordan, a quiet guy who lived 3 houses down. He was standing by his garage, sipping a soda, trying not to look curious, but he was. "She does this," he finally said, almost like a warning. Karen's made 3 families move out in the last year, all over made-up fines and rules she twists around. But she's never called the cops before. You're the first. I nodded, not saying much. Then he leaned in, real casual, and said, "What's with the captain thing? You military?" I just gave a half smile and said, something like that, which only made his eyebrows go up. He didn't push, though. Just nodded and went back inside. As the week went on, strange things started happening. My mailbox got jammed with junk. Flyers way too many to be random. I found a sticky note on my truck windshield that said, "We watch out for each other here." Harmless words, but the handwriting matched the notice Karen had slapped on my door earlier. Then one night, my motion lights flicked on at 2 a.m., and I caught a shadow moving past the side of my house. I went outside, but whoever it was had already gone. No footprints, no noise. Just the feeling that someone wanted to send a message. Whatever. Karen thought she started that day. It wasn't just about an HOA fine anymore. Something deeper was going on in this neighborhood. And I wasn't sure if I had walked into a setup. A few nights later, I was sitting in the garage, lights off, sipping cold coffee from a paper cup, and listening to the faint hum of crickets outside. Something in my gut told me things weren't done. Since Karen's outburst, I'd noticed little changes. My trash bins got turned over twice. Someone kept tapping into my WI until I locked it down tight. Then came the letter, slipped under my front door in the middle of the night. No name, no signature. Just typed words, "You don't belong here. Leave quietly." I didn't show anyone the note. Not yet. I needed to understand what I was really dealing with. This wasn't just Karen being a control freak. There was something underneath it all, something the rest of the neighbors either feared or were too used to question. I started watching more closely. Karen met with 2 other HOA board members every evening on her porch. Ways the same people, always hushed. Conversations. One of them, a guy named Bill, had been in city zoning before retiring. The other, Denise, worked part-time at the post office and somehow seemed to know everyone's business. One night, Jordan stopped by again. He looked uneasy. "You need to know," he said, voice low. "Karen's husband isn't just some retired accountant. He used to work for a private security firm. They keep things clean around here, their own way. When someone doesn't follow the rules, they get pushed out." That explained the cameras I hadn't noticed before, small ones, disguised on a kit. I'm disguised on a few lampposts near my yard. And I realized I wasn't just being watched. I was being tested. The final straw came a few days later when I woke up and found muddy boot prints, leading from my back gate to my porch and back out again. I hadn't told anyone I was military, not officially, but someone knew. Someone was sending a message. I stood in the middle of my kitchen, staring down at those footprints through the window, every muscle in my body tense. They wanted me gone. But I wasn't planning on going anywhere then. Just before sunrise, the doorbell rang. I stood still for a second, watching the door like it might swing open on its own. The doorbell hadn't rung once. Rang 3 times. Slow, deliberate. I checked the peephole, expecting maybe Karen or one of her board members, but it wasn't anyone I recognized. A man in a dark gray hoodie stood there, hands tucked into the front pocket, head slightly down. I opened the door just a crack, ready for anything. He looked up, and the first thing I noticed wasn't his face, was the small patch on his sleeve. It was faded, but I knew it. Same private security firm Karen's husband was supposedly part of. The man didn't smile, didn't try to introduce himself. He just said, "You're making them nervous." I kept my voice calm. "Who's them?" He glanced around, eyes scanning the rooftops and parked cars like he'd done this before. You've got 2 days. After that, it won't just be warnings." Then he walked off, just like that. Not fast, not slow, just confident. Like he knew no one would stop him. I watched until he turned the corner, then shut the door and locked it. Twice, whatever this was. It wasn't just Karen or the HOA trying to throw their weight around anymore. This was organized, calculated, and the fact that someone showed up before sunrise to deliver a message meant they were watching around the clock later that day. I went to the community office, trying to find any official HOA documents about security patrols. The front desk woman looked nervous when I mentioned the patch. She flipped through a drawer, pretending to search, then whispered, "You didn't hear this from me, but you're not the first one to ask about that symbol. The last guy, house went up for sale a week after. No forwarding address." That night, as I reviewed my own security camera footage, I found something that made my stomach tighten. At exactly 2:47 a.m., a shadow stood just outside the cameras. Range, motionless for over 5 minutes. Watching, waiting, and I hadn't even known they were there. That same night, I made a decision I wasn't going to wait for something to happen. I pulled out an old sat phone from a box I hadn't unpacked yet, powered it up, and scrolled through my contacts. There was only one name I needed. I made the call brief. Just coordinates, a date, and a single phrase. Need eyes, the next day passed slow. Karen walked her dog by my house twice, pretending not to look up. Jordan texted me, asking if everything was okay. I told him to stay clear. For a bit. That evening, I parked my truck at the edge of the block and walked the neighborhood like nothing was wrong. But every step, every glance at a dark window or parked SUV confirmed that they weren't just watching. They were closing in at 2 o'clock. AM sharp, the security lights in my backyard clicked on. I didn't go out. I waited. At 2:03, there was a soft knock at the back door. Slow, measured. I had the camera system feeding straight to my phone. 2 men stood there. One was the same guy from earlier, the patch on his hoodie clearer now. The other, taller, wore a ball cap low over his face. They weren't here to talk. Before they could move, floodlights snapped on from the neighbors' roof, then another light from across the street. 3 silhouettes emerged, none of them from the neighborhood. My contact had brought backup. Real backup. Hands where we can see them. A voice barked through a small radio. The 2 men froze. One tried to run, but was taken down cleanly. No noise, no mess. Just fast, surgical work. Within seconds, they were cuffed and removed quietly. No sirens, no shouting. By dawn, they were gone. So was Karen. A moving truck arrived before sunrise. No goodbyes. No note. Just her porch suddenly empty, her flower beds unwatered. But here's the twist no one saw coming. A week later, I got a plain envelope in my mailbox. No return address. Inside was a photo, grainy, black and white. It showed me standing at my window that first night. But it wasn't from my camera. It was from above. Someone else had been watching, and they still were. I stared at that photo for a long time, not out of fear, but curiosity. Someone had eyes in the sky, long before I ever stepped into that neighborhood. And whoever they were, they knew exactly where I was and what I'd walked into since. I didn't tell anyone about it, not even Jordan. There was no point. Whatever operation Karen and her people were part of had been bigger than HOA complaints or bogus ranch fines. It was a front for something deeper, something off the books. And once it got exposed, it vanished just as fast. The neighborhood, slowly, returned to normal, or at least something close to it. The fake fines stopped. The petty behavior disappeared. Even the board meetings shifted tone. New members stepped in. More transparency, fewer threats. Jordan and I ended up grabbing beers one night, laughing about how I moved and expecting peace and quiet, and got a mini spy thriller instead. He still called me Captain, but this time with a grin. A month later, I finally unpacked the last box. Life started feeling normal again. But every now and then, I'd catch a flash of reflection in a window or hear the soft click of something mechanical resetting in the background. Just enough to remind me someone was still out there, keeping watch. Whether it was a warning, a thank you, or a reminder to stay alert, I wasn't sure. But I'd learned one thing for sure. Sometimes, the quietest places hide the loudest secrets. So yeah, Karen called the cops over a fake HOA fine the day I moved in. She thought she was in charge. Turns out, she was just another piece on the board. And me? I wasn't just the new guy. I was the checkmate she didn't see coming.